allow me to bring out the Danish flag today to be just a little bit patriotic, because in today's video I got two brand new and very unusual things to show you. A Danish Vermouth based on Danish red wine. Yes, there is such a thing as Danish red wine, and a Danish juniper-centric gin liqueur based on one of Denmark's most awarded gins. So let's check them out. Hi guys, and welcome to High on Gin. Well, it is not every day that I get to present two world premieres in one video. And I have never done a review on a Danish-made vermouth or a Danish-made gin liqueur before. Both of them made less than 20 kilometers from where I live. And when I got them, the vermouth and the gin, the first thing that I really thought of was, of course, the idea to combine the two, making my favorite gin cocktail, the Negroni. But let's get back to that a little bit later on. Let's start by looking at the vermouth here. This one here is a cooperation between the famous Stone Grange Distillery that produces the highly awarded gin series called ELG Gin, and then Kelleris Vingaard, something as unusual as a Danish Vineyard located in the northern parts of Zealand, about 30 kilometers north of our capital, Copenhagen. And you see the two owners, Henrik Elsner from ELG and Søren Hartvig Jensen from Kelleris Vingaard, well, they wanted to produce a Danish vermouth based on primarily Danish-grown ingredients. But before we take a dive into this one here, why don't we take a look at the story behind vermouth? Because the question is, of course, what is vermouth? Well, although vermouth's name comes from the German word Vermouth, meaning wormwood, the use of the name vermouth is actually Italian in origin. And the drink itself, well, it may have trails all the way back to 400 BCs and to the Greek physician Hippocrates that macerated wormwood and flowers in strong, sweet Greek wine, creating a medicinal tonic that he used to treat patients with, when they had back pains or neck pains, anemia, or to treat any discomfort that women might have when having their period. And if we go back all the way up to the 1500s, we start to see what we can identify as a modern-day vermouth in the region that was known as Savoy. Savoy was this small ancient kingdom in the Western Alps between Switzerland and Italy and France. In this region, there were two main areas where vermouth was made, one in Piedmont and one near the southeastern French border. Since the region had a lot of mediocre wine, the idea of, pepping it up with some local botanicals and some more exotic spices and herbs was an obvious idea. The idea of covering up low-quality products with herbs and sugar, that has been done numerous times in history. Just look at the famous gin craze in England in the early 1700s, where the lousy gin really needed a huge cover-up. But here, it actually turned out to work very well when mixing the local wine with wormwood and other herbs and spices. And it became not only a fashionable drink at the Royal Court of Savoy, but also at the nearby Royal Court of Bavaria, and later on a fashionable drink at the French court as well. So when people say that vermouth, as we know it, was invented in Italy, well, that is partly true. And vermouth was invented in Savoy, that covers both some of Italy and some of France. But what is true when talking about Italy and vermouth, well, that is that the first commercial brand was created by Antonio Benedetto Carpano in Turin in Italy in 1786. He decided to make a high-quality product by using excellent wine as a base for his vermouth instead of poor quality wine, and mixing the wine with high quality ingredients such as wormwood, and he decided to call his recipe Vermouth. And his product became a huge hit with the Duke of Savoy. And since the main language in Savoy was French, the name was gradually changed to Vermouth instead, as this is the French pronunciation of the German word Vermouth. Well, enough about the history. Let's take a giant step up till today. If we look what the definition is according to EU, according to EEC Regulation 1601-91, well, there are three things that differentiate vermouth from other aromatized wines. 1, it must be flavored with at least one herb from Artemisia wormwood family, but without the quantity being stated. 2, at least 75% of the finished products must be wine made according to EU wine legislation. And 3, it must have an ABV at least 14.5% ABV and a maximum of 22%. So let's take a look at these 3 requirements and compare them to this new Danish ELG Vermouth. Well, let's start with the ingredients, of course. Well, as I said, number 1 in the EU regulation states that the vermouth must contain extracts from the Artemisia genus of plants. The Artemisia family contains hundreds of plants. Many of these, such as mugwort or sagebrush, are used to add the characteristic bitter element to vermouth, but wormwood is sometimes actually excluded from the mix entirely in many modern vermouth, as it has this more dominant herbaceous bitterness to it. But to hardcore vermouth fans and connoisseurs making vermouth without the original wormwood, well, that would be like making gin without juniper. And in this ELG Vermouth, real wormwood or Artemisia athynium is used. This is actually grown in ELG Distillery's own garden. Partly because they want, of course, to make a vermouth, but partly because they also make their own absinthe, where wormwood is also a very vital part. And you may have heard that wormwood is blamed for having this hallucinogenic effect. This is simply not true, but a result of earlier times' fake news. It gathered most of its bad reputation when the French wine industry staged a smear campaign in the 1800s against the liqueur absinthe, which had stolen many of the wine industry's customer base after a plague had hit them hard, causing a major dip in French wine production. When the wine industry recovered, many of its customers had switched to drinking absinthe, which led them to launch a propaganda campaign. And you must say that they had a lot of success with this fake news stories. But besides wormwood, ELG Vermouth is created with botanicals like hops, angostura, star anise, orange, fennel seeds, angelica, and other herbs and spices that, together with the wine, creates this very fruity, floral, and herbaceous notes and this slight dryness in it. The second requirement to call it a vermouth is that minimum of 75% of the finished product must be wine. In this vermouth here, as I said earlier, they have used a Danish red wine from Kelleris Vingaard, a vineyard, where they have planted more than 4,000 grape wines, primarily the dark-skinned Rondo grape. Kelleris Vingaard is known for their red wines, their sparkling wines like this one here, that is made the same way as champagne is made. They're known for their port-type liqueurs. And all of them, they go under the name of Utopia. And I guess this name was chosen as winemaking in Denmark was considered an utopian dream when they started in 2001. But you see, determination and real focus on high quality and not least very, very hard work proved the critics wrong. And then the third criteria that must be fulfilled, if you want to call it a vermouth, is that the ABV must be between 14.5 and 22%. And this one here has an ABV of 18%. So it checks all the 3 boxes. You see, if we look at this one here, it has this very deep, opaque, purple, ruby red color, and this very compact rim width, which, as far as I know, and I'm definitely not a wine or vermouth connoisseur here, but I think that indicates that the wine used in this one here is a fairly young wine. Yes. You see in the nose, you get this beautiful, fruity, flowery, light vinous smell. You get the herbaceous notes from the wormwood. You get the touch of alcohol that really underlines the acidic element from the wine. Let's taste it. The taste delivers more flavors, more notes from a young red wine, more acidity, and this cool, very cool touch of dryness. These light and airy floral notes they're really coming to life. It has a sweetness to it, but it's really not overly sweet. It has this very fine, this very well-balanced, and this super delicious taste to it. Super delicious vermouth. And when talking about sweetness in vermouth, there are different types of vermouth that indicates how sweet it is. Well, there is extra dry vermouth that has less than 30 grams of sugar per liter in it. There is dry that has less than 50 grams of sugar in it. And this one here, the ELG Vermouth, has 45 grams of sugar per liter. So this one should be called a dry vermouth. There is semi-dry that has less than 90 grams of sugar. There is semi-dolce that has less than 130 grams. And then there is dolce vermouth that has more than 130 grams of sugar per liter. That's a lot. Having a vermouth just like that, or with an ice cube, you know what? That is so underrated. I think just sipping it neat like this is such a joy. Using vermouth as in a Negroni is an obvious thing. With a juniper-centric gin, like ELG No. 1, you'll make this super fresh, herbaceous Negroni. The vinous touch from the vermouth, the herbaceous touch from the Campari, and the juniper and the citrus elements from the gin really gives this fresh and spicy Negroni here. The guys behind it, they recommend that you use a little less gin in that Negroni that you would normally use. Instead of 5 centiliters, just use 4 centiliters of gin and then 5 centiliters of vermouth and 5 centiliters of Campari. Normally you would, squeeze this orange zest over it, but I think you should just drink it like that. But if you want a sweeter and less herbaceous Negroni, well, you could use the new ELG Gin Liqueur, a sweet liqueur with an ABV of 41%. This liqueur is simply the IWSC Gold Awarded ELG No. 1. It is this super elegant classic gin made with only 3 ingredients: juniper, coriander seed, and carrots. And then there is sugar added to it, a lot of it. You see, if we look at it, you can see that it is, well, it's not totally crystal clear. It has this little touch of brownish color to it, which is due to the fact that sugar has been added. When we look at it, if you swirl the gin liqueur in the glass, you also get these droplets on the side of the glass, or these legs or tears, as the Frenchmen call them. Again, this is due to the high sugar content in the liqueur. Especially if you have chilled the bottle before serving it, this liqueur here really appears very thick and syrupy. When you smell it, well, you do get the juniper that really stands out. You really get this beautiful green, piney, resinous smell here. Although it's toned by the sugar, It has this slight orange touch to it, and it's all wrapped in this sweet cushion. It's such an inviting smell. When you taste it, the first thing that strikes you is the thick liquid, and then you get the sweetness, and then boom, comes out the juniper and the citrus notes that really bursts through the sugar wrapping carried by the high ABV. The aftertaste is faded by sugar that really takes over again. It's like getting a piece of candy where the sugar outside is hiding a big, tasty juniper berry surprise inside it. I love this one. I think it's so simple, but yet it is so true to ELG number 1. And I'm not the only one that thinks so. Even though it has just been released, ELG entered it into the IWSC 2022 competition, and they were as excited as I was and awarded it with a gold medal. Serving this one neat but chilled? Well, serve it to a good cup of coffee. If your guest likes a sweet digestive, or if you do, this one is simply amazing. If you like a Negroni to be a bit sweeter, you can, of course, as I said, use this gin here instead of a regular gin together with this ELG Vermouth. And if you love a sweet gin and tonic, well, you could even use this gin liqueur here. The brilliant ELG number 1 that it's built upon really shines through the sugar. Just use a little piece of lemon or lime in your gin and tonic, or zest of lemon and lime, to really balance the sweetness with some additional acidity. And you know what? There is probably 1,000 different cocktails that would work with this one here, and I can't wait to hear your ideas. But let me give you a little warning. This sweet liqueur here, it may seem innocent, but it is what I would call a wolf in sheep's clothing. This one here, it kicks like a mule. So guys, there you have it. 2 new brilliant products. I love the young, fresh flavor packed Danish Vermouth, and I love the totally surprising gin liqueur with its sweetness and with the juniper berry solidly placed in the center of it. I love that I can still be caught by surprise, surprised by something as unusual as a Danish red wine that is used to make a Danish vermouth, and that one of my favorite gins, the ELG Gin number 1, is used to make something as unusual as a gin liqueur. You know what? I love surprises. Until next time.